Okay, so today we're picking up with foreign policy and national defense. Real quickly, we're going to do kind of a brief overview of our nation's history with foreign policy. We eventually developed from isolationism to internationalism. In the beginning of our country, there was really no concern with foreign affairs. We were kind of too concerned with our own needs. We were a brand new country that was just developing, so we were really kind of unsure of what direction we were going with and who we were going to be working with and all that kind of stuff. So we had a policy called isolationism. And isolationism is where you are purposefully refusing to become involved in world affairs. You just don't get involved. It's not something that is a concern. And so that's what our policy for foreign policy is going to be for like our first 150 years or so. And then we will shift to a policy called internationalism. World War II will convince Americans that no one can live in isolation. It doesn't work. And that the survival of any country kind of depends on the affairs of the rest of the world. That if the rest of the world is in turmoil, we're not going to be very successful, especially economically, or eventually we're going to get dragged into stuff. So it just made us kind of more aware of that. Any country's upheavals are going to affect us, whether it's in trade or whether it's defense-wise, because we are kind of economically or dependent upon other countries for like oil and steel and coffee, all kinds of stuff. So it's only through our policies that the U.S. is going to be able to survive, and even surviving a peaceful world, we need to have these policies. And so through our foreign policies, we try to promote and protect the security and well-being of other nations, and making sure that as long as they're good, we're going to be good, sort of idea. So keep talking about foreign policy. So what is foreign policy? Well, foreign policy is all of the stands and actions that a nation takes in its relationship with other countries, of how we deal with them, what is our reaction to them. So we don't have just one foreign policy. We actually have many different policies on a lot of different topics. Foreign policy can include treaties, it can include trade policies, defense budget policies, foreign aid policies, how we negotiate, our policies on immigration, our policies on space. There's just a ton of stuff, like exchange programs, our foreign policy, our use of technology and how we purchase it and that kind of stuff. Those are all things that interact with foreign policy. So with our foreign policy, the U.S. can and does lead world affairs. We do have the strongest military in the world at this time, and so we tend to take the lead on a lot of things, on a lot of issues of conflicts that are happening in the world. People look to us for guidance, kind of thing. We also endorse programs that will help to gain the U.S. support in foreign countries. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in order to get that attention. So what are the president's responsibilities with all this? The president is our chief diplomat. So it's his job to be diplomatic and work with other countries. He's also our commander-in-chief. So when our military goes out, he's in charge of determining how many troops go out and where they're going and for how long they're going to stay and what their mission is and all that kind of stuff. He makes the final decisions on war, like I said, on troop placement and those kinds of things. And he also is responsible for making and conducting our foreign policy, so determining exactly what our foreign policy is. Like I said, there's many different aspects of it, so he's kind of busy with that. But he does have help. He has the Department of State and the Department of Defense to help him out with that. The State Department is the president's main person in foreign affairs. The Secretary of State is chosen by the president and approved by the Senate, just like any other cabinet office. But their job is to give advice on foreign matters. Their job is to advise on foreign countries and how we deal with them. And they also rank first in the cabinet members. So it kind of, they rank first because of being created first, but the reason it was created first was because it was a very important job. Need to have this advice. And so it was created in 1781 under the Articles of Confederation. So it's one of the few jobs that actually kind of transfers over because not much was left of the articles after they were done with it, and this is one that actually does transfer over. George Washington first appointed Thomas Jefferson as the first Secretary of State because of his connections with France. And if you remember, after the Revolutionary War, France had been our ally, and we were fighting against England. So we wanted to have a very good relationship with France. So he appoints Jefferson because Jefferson had very close ties with France and a good working relationship with France. The first woman to become Secretary of State will be Madeleine Albright, who is actually appointed by Clinton in 1997, and we have had several women serve as Secretary of State since then, so it's been kind of an interesting change in our government. So, like I said, their duties are to make and conduct the foreign policy and to oversee it. They manage the work of the department, the entire State Department, and it's overseas posts as well, so like ambassadors and that kind of thing. So, like I said, the organization and key components of the State Department, it is very, very concerned with the foreign service of people who are serving overseas for us. There's more than 4,200 people who represent the U.S. in foreign countries, and international law states that countries have the law of legation. And law of legation is the right to send and receive diplomatic representatives. So you have the right to take on ambassadors, and you have the right to send ambassadors, basically. So these ambassadors go to each country, and there's over 160 countries that we send ambassadors to. And the president appoints these ambassadors, and the Senate has to approve it. So it's just like a cabinet position, kind of. The ambassadors are personal representatives of the president and the U.S. So you want to pick somebody who's going to establish really good relations, maybe already has connections in the country. So they report to the president with everything that's happening in the country. They try to keep them up to date as to what is happening in each of these countries that might be in the U.S.'s interest or something that might be of a concern to us. And so, like I said, these ambassadors, it's kind of a good thing if they have good contacts with the leaders of these countries and are familiar with the language and the history. So it's kind of a need to know. It helps if you know the language, if you know the history, if you know the customs and culture, because then you can read their body language a little bit better if you know what is customary for that country or for that nationality. Typically today, these ambassadors, it's a requirement for them to have this background, to have the knowledge and history and customs, and to be immersed in that, because that does make communication easier. It makes understanding the people more useful. That information that's provided by the ambassador is going to be more useful to the president because you can trust it, rather than sending some Nubian who has no idea, how to speak the language and has to rely on translators. Well, translators can mess it up sometimes, or translators can give you a slightly different version of things to make it seem not so nice, or seem nicer than it is, or so translators sometimes can bring a bias to things. So it is kind of important that you have that connection. So other than ambassadors, we do send other special diplomats out, and usually these special diplomats are like representatives to the UN or to other conferences, like the International Conference on Pollution. So we send them to those kinds of things. The State Department is also responsible for issuing passports and visas, and passports are a government-issued certificate that allows the citizen to travel to foreign countries. And so it allows you to travel to these foreign countries. It doesn't say you can live there. It is just saying that you are able to travel. So it typically is issued, you have to prove who you are and all that kind of stuff. Visas are documents that certify that a person is a citizen of a nation, but a visa is usually what you would get if you're going to live for an extended period of time in a foreign country. So, like if you were going to go live in Spain, you would probably need a visa rather than a passport. You're probably going to have both, but your visa will say that you are an American citizen, but you are living for a certain amount of time, and they do have like a time limit on those, that you are living in Spain for whatever reason. Ambassadors and State Department officials also have something called diplomatic immunity, and diplomatic immunity just means that they are not subject to the laws of the country or the nation that they are in, because the laws of Afghanistan or Libya are going to be very different than the laws of the United States. And so they can't be arrested, sued, or taxed. Doesn't mean that they can just have a free reign and do whatever they want, because they are still subject to American law. So if they mess up and are reported, American officers will be there to investigate. But like if you're in Afghanistan as an official, you can't be arrested, sued, or taxed by Afghani government or Afghani police. It has to be an American sent thing. Your residence, your house can't be searched without your consent. Your families and relatives receive the same treatment, that they can't also be arrested, sued, or taxed. But like I said, you can't abuse that power, or you could be expelled from your job. And if it's a mistreatment of an international law, like you murdered somebody, then you are subject to their laws, because that's an international violation as opposed to just something that would be an American law or something like that. So that's the State Department. Then we have the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense was created when they combined the War Department with the Navy Department. And again, this was a cabinet office created to help the president. What's kind of interesting about the Defense Department is that it is under civil control, and this is very important. It's emphasized in the preamble to the Constitution, not the part you guys memorized, but later on there's a second part of the preamble that you didn't have to memorize. But it's emphasized in the preamble that we need to keep control of the military in civilian hands as opposed to kind of allowing the military to have free reign. And so the Defense Department, the secretary, is always a civilian. So when you think about it, like the president is our commander-in-chief, but he is a civilian in terms of he is elected by the people, that he's kind of reined in that way, that if he doesn't do what we want as commander-in-chief, he can be removed from office. He also needs the authority of Congress in order to go to war, to declare war, because only Congress can declare war. So again, congressional members are elected, so it's within civilian control. Civilian meaning us. We are the civilians controlling how the military is being used. So in keeping with that, the Secretary of Defense can't be a military person. It has to be somebody who is a civilian who's going to be accountable to the people. And so, like I said, the Secretary of Defense is appointed by the President and approved by the Senate, just like any other cabinet decision. And they have two responsibilities, and that's to make and carry out the defense policy. And we have multiple defense policies. And they also control the running of the department, which you're looking at not quite, but almost close to 1 million people that they're in charge of. And their office is in the Pentagon. About 1/6 of our spending, maybe a little bit more than that, probably a fifth of our spending each year goes to the Defense Department. And so they have an extremely large budget that they have to try and work with and all kinds of stuff. So I guess one of the major concerns is that, well, if it's a civilian in control of the Defense Department, how much do they really know? How much can they really advise? Well, they also have people who help them out. So they have chief military aides, and among their aides are the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And there's 5 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they serve as military advisors to the Secretary and to the President of the United States and to the National Security Council. And these are your 5 top-ranking uniformed officers in our armed forces. So it includes the chairman, and the chairman can come from any of the branches. I believe currently the chairman is from the Marines, I think, but the chairman is always whoever is your top ranking officer in all the branches, or who has the most experience and is the top ranking. So the second is the Army Chief of Staff, so whoever's your top ranking Army person. And the third is the Naval Chief of Staff, so whoever's top ranking in the Navy. The fourth is the Commandant of the Marine Corps, so again, highest ranking of the Marines. And the fifth is the Air Force Chief of Staff, so the highest ranking Air Force officer. So when we look at our military departments and how they work within the Department of Defense, Department of Army is the largest armed service. It's also the oldest. It's been around the longest. It is our ground-based force. It's our land force. It's the infantry, those that we send in. But they must be ready to defeat any attack on the U.S. They got to be ready to defend other nations that are in the U.S. interest. And so they're busy organizing, training, and equipping their forces. The Department of Army includes the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserves. And the Chief of Staff is the leader, like I said, and he or she serves on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Roughly, the Army is about 500,000, 500,000 people. Women are able to serve in all units of the Army. And like I said, the Army is made up of soldiers who fight our enemy forces. And typically the Army is used as infantry, and our infantry defends our land. It's like our foot soldiers. They're on the ground kind of thing. They also have an artillery, and artillery is heavy weapons and anti-aircraft weaponry. And then a cavalry, and the cavalry is armored vehicles and helicopters. It used to be horses, but we've obviously moved beyond horses into modern times. So the second department is the Department of Navy, and the Department of Navy was established in 1775, and it's responsible for our sea warfare and our sea defense. The Chief of Naval Operations, or the CNO, is the leader of the Navy, and it's roughly 400,000 officers and enlisted. The duties of the Department of Navy is to defend the land bases that the Navy operates from, and to carry out any other land operations related to the Navy. Kind of within the Department of the Navy is the Marine Corps. So they were established also in 1775, and they work in the Navy Department, but they're under a different commander. They're under the Marine Corps Commandant, not the Chief of Naval Operations like the Navy is. So it's slightly different. So they are kind of a separate thing. The Marines are seen as sort of the elite branch of the Navy. And then we have the Department of the Air Force. And the Air Force was established in 1947. It is our youngest military department, but in recent times it has become our first line of defense. We tend to rely on the Air Force before going in with the Army, the Marines, or the Navy. So they are our first line of defense. If we can solve it by flying over with planes, we can do that. So the duties of the Air Force is to defend the U.S. in the air, to defend us from enemy air, ground, and sea forces, and to destroy other war-related targets. They also provide transportation, if needed, to get people from, especially within the Navy and the Army, if they need extra planes for transportation. We kind of rely on the Air Force for that too. And the Air Force is made up of, again, about 400,000 officers and enlisted. So that is kind of a breakdown. Our next video, we're going to be looking at other agencies and other things that help out with foreign and defense policy.